It has been 22 years since the last addition to the NFL's league size, that being the Houston Texans. And with the massive growth of the league internationally as well as nationally, I think it's time to start talking about these next NFL expansion teams. Now, in one of our most popular videos on the channel, we discussed international expansions. That was in the UK, and that was Canada and Mexico, and all of these different international places that the NFL could expand to. With that, there's a lot of issues, and we all discuss it in the video. Go check it out if you haven't already. But that video released exactly 1 year ago today, and today I want to tackle national expansions. Now, there's several criteria I have for every single franchise I do bring up as an addition. But with that in mind, if there's some team, some location, a city that doesn't make the cut, go ahead and stay tuned to the end where I have an honorable mentions tab. So in that, I discuss why I excluded certain locations and cities. Now, with all of that preamble out of the way, let's get into the first NFL expansion team, the San Antonio Vipers. Now, San Antonio was one of the biggest cities in the United States, sitting at 7th in terms of population. It resides in Texas, so it does have that Cowboys rivalry alongside the Houston Texans, who were another recent addition to the league. San Antonio has more going for it than just its population. It has a stadium already, which is home to the UTSA Roadrunners. With a capacity of 65,000, it could easily serve as the home of an NFL franchise. However, I would think it would be more on the table for them to do a new construction in New Braunfels, kind of split the distance between Austin and San Antonio to have access to a huge pool of fans. As for the mascot, I went with the Vipers, and there's many historically important ones, cultural ones, I suppose, with the Alamos, with missions, and doing all of these things to build on the history of San Antonio. But it all feels too similar to the Saints. So instead, I opted for a Vipers mascot. Snakes are prevalent in Texas, and it would also give you a good set of colorways. You know, you could match coral snakes, you could match rattlesnakes, and just really add to the uniqueness of the team and the mascot. Now, for this franchise, I am setting them in the NFC South, with San Antonio facing off against the Buccaneers, the Panthers, the aforementioned Saints, and the Falcons twice a year. Something about this slew of teams really made San Antonio feel like it would fit in great. And of course, geography is something I care about in these divisions and where I'm placing teams, and it really does set them up perfectly. All right, now I set you up with the plausible one off rip, and so I've given myself a little bit of reputation with you. Now I'm going to rip off the band-aid. I'm going to be adding the Boise Bobcats into the NFL. I think that it would just be such a fun addition, and you're adding another big cat into the league to go with the Lions, the Panthers, the Jags, and Bengals as well. Now, this is one of my favorite ones of the video, I won't lie. And I do think that with this, I do need to justify it a little bit more than some other ones I do have. So, of course, they already have a stadium, but it's only 36,000 capacity. And so it wouldn't be a permanent one. But with a new construction that could be built after a few years, I definitely could see them being a franchise that stays in Boise. And Idaho has been one of the fastest growing populations of a state across the US. And then with Boise being the most populous one in Idaho, it makes sense for a city to be the most populous in a growing state. I definitely think that they could see themselves landing an NFL franchise. And so with the love that Boise State as a college team has had and the way that fans flock to support them, I don't doubt that they would do the same for an NFL team in the area. After all, it's not like Boise is known for its nightlife. There's not much else to do. The colors for this team, I imagine being a tan and navy, and tan's another color that isn't super popular in the NFL, kind of giving it more of that area to be unique and set itself apart from the current teams that are in the league. Now, I know I said geography, and it'll make more sense later in the video why I'm placing them in the NFC North, but I will be placing them in the NFC North. So it's a deeply historical division, but someone has to get added to them across the board somewhere. So with the Lions, the Packers, the Bears, and the Vikings, I think that you add in the Bobcats and you've got a good blue collar mentality across the board in these northern states. And really, I think that they would fit in good. Our next team will be the first addition to the AFC side, and that will be the Salt Lake City Stallions. Salt Lake City has had some immense growth, something I did value when looking for cities to put these teams in, and an NFL franchise would drive that growth even further. It's already the biggest city in Utah. It's 33rd in the US for population and growth, and it's really poised for a franchise. The nearby BYU stadium could prove to be a good temporary stadium. Something I did value was, seeing if there was a stadium nearby that had seats to be the mainstay, or if they would need to immediately go into a new build, they could, use the temp stadium for half a season or a full season. Now, with that, I would be placing the Salt Lake City Stallions into the AFC West, which is quite fitting geography wise, but it's also slotting them into another division with a horse mascot, something I kind of like. Um, so, there could be a late season push to win the division, and it could be between the Stallions and the Broncos, and they're both 10-5. And guess what? It really sounds like a Kentucky Derby promo, and I love it. The Salt Lake City Stallions would rock an elegant uniform, one that's white and gold, and you've got several alternatives that work for it to be black and just brown, like mixing in all these natural horse colors. Unlike the Broncos, who are very much like a stylized white horse with an orange mane, and they rock creamsicle colors at times. I think Stallions would definitely lean more into like a natural colored palette for what horses usually are. Next up is Orlando. I'm adding the Orlando Apollos to the AFC East, and I added a team to Texas and Florida, which are both states that already have multiple teams, and it might not be the most exciting, but it's plausible. I ripped the band-aid off of Boise. I have to do some more plausible ones in here as well. So they're large markets. They both have stadiums that could be immediate franchise homes. Camping World Stadium has a capacity of 60,000 in Orlando, and it's already hosted NFL events as well. It's hosted the Pro Bowl 5 times in this past decade, so I think it's got a relationship with the NFL already. And then you add to the area itself, Cape Canaveral being nearby. I think that Apollos is really a name that would respect the history of the area. I discussed doing that with San Antonio with Alamos or something, but I pulled myself from that. Apollos definitely seems more of the vibe of Orlando with Cape Canaveral and the Apollo missions going on. So for uniforms, I would like to see them mimic the appearance of like space mission attire, and there could even be a fun alternative jersey with bright orange spacesuits from the olden days of the space missions. And with the division, I'm having it join the AFC East, so there's a fun in-state rivalry with the Dolphins there, and then we keep two teams in Florida playing against the northern states with Bills, Patriots, and Jets twice a year, which would really like. There's that whole talk of like, oh, the Dolphin Stadium is so hot to play in, and then they have to go play in these really cold stadiums, and that would be the same for the Orlando Apollos. Next up is going to be the Toronto White Wolves. Yes, this is a Canadian team in what I kind of prefaced as being a national expansion. So yes, our only international expansion of the video. Toronto's been home to NBA Raptors, and there's a lot of competition with like the CFL and a lot of other entertainment in the area. But the NFL already has two teams in LA, and they put a team in Las Vegas, so I don't think that they're going to shy away from entertainment competition. I think that, Toronto is a bullseye shot for the league to go ahead and add a team. They have a population of 2.8 million, which would make it the third largest city to have an NFL team off rip. And with their mascot, I went with the White Wolves. As an American, I won't pretend to know a lot about Canada or its history. I mean, mooses could be an alternative. Lumberjacks, maybe. Don't know. Maple syrup somewhere in there. But with my video, I'm going with the White Wolves. I think that it's a great mascot name. And obviously, the team colors would focus around grayscale, white, gray, black. I could see the jerseys incorporating some dark red if they gave a logo like dark red eyes. Of course, I have my mock-ups here, but these are like quickly mocked up. They're not meant to be a final product that I would assume the NFL would be pushing out. I'll be placing the Toronto White Wolves in the AFC North. It really would feel wrong putting them in a division that doesn't have North in the name, so I went with AFC. Of course, with Boise, it wasn't really going to fit in the AFC North, so Toronto fitting in the AFC North, especially with how close together all these cities are, I think works a lot better. Now, you've got the Ravens, Steelers, and Bengals with the White Wolves and the Browns. I think that those are some really good mascot names, and it really just feels like a powerhouse division, plus the Browns, alongside really good mascots and just a good blue-collar mentality of what I imagine would be some pretty tough football. Next up, I'll be adding the Oklahoma City Outlaws, another city that has been home to an NBA team. I think that's, a good track record to show when I was considering these places. They're currently 20th in population for the US, and they are in a growing state. Another thing that I have valued in these picks thus far. What really sealed the deal for me with the Outlaws, though, is new rivalries that can be born as like a translation from the college level to the NFL. Oklahoma and Texas, outstanding rivalry that can move into the NFL with, the San Antonio Vipers and the Houston Texans and the Dallas Cowboys, and then you've got the OKC Outlaws matching up against them. I think that it would always be quite a hype event, and because of that, I'm going to be putting them in the NFC East. Now, I know that with some of the things I've said with, geography mattering, um, yeah, the Cowboys aren't really meant to be in an East division, but I'm adding a team to an existing division. I'm adding Oklahoma in with the Dallas Cowboys, and I think that it really will help with these two, the Cowboys and the Outlaws, almost being on the same side where they're Western teams facing off against East Coast, and then they have their own bit of rivalry with each other, whereas Cowboys and Outlaws, it's very Western feeling, Old West, Wild West, and I think that their colors would be orange and black, classic like Wild West colors, and I don't really have any heading on alternatives, like maybe some red in there for, more of the bad guy bandit colors, but just off rip, I think the OKC Outlaws would be a great addition and immediately have some rivalries. Next, probably the one a lot of people have been waiting for to hear is Portland, Oregon. I'm adding the Portland Pioneers into the NFL, into the NFC West. And yeah, I think I'm split on this one, to tell the truth. Now, Oregon is great for a location to put an NFL team in, and Portland is the biggest city there. And there's that immediate rivalry with the Seahawks. And so it's like this great mesh of all of these things I have valued. However, it's been a long time coming where Portland's been considered as a possible expansion team. And there's a lot of politics within the area that would kind of push NFL ownership away from putting a team there. Now, as we've seen from the Kansas City Chiefs as of late, the owner is requesting public funding for the stadium upkeep because it's a stadium that is used for things besides the NFL. And that's something that's been going on in Kansas City for a few years now. This issue would be present at the onset of a Portland team. They're not going to have a full stadium built up for billions of dollars without some public funding, and that's something that the politics of the area probably won't allow. So with that said, it'd be a big hurdle, but obviously with all of the other things going for it, I have decided to put Portland, Oregon in here with the Pioneers. And so with the Pioneers, I'm thinking very Davy Crockett. Despite him having not much of a tie to Oregon, I think, just the idea of that manifest destiny and the Oregon Trail, all of that stuff kind of coming together with the Pioneers and rocking a brown and black, real woodsy vibe. It could have been Lumberjacks even, but maybe that could be an alternative uniform, something like that. And then finally, we come to the New Mexico Apaches in Albuquerque. Now, this one, yeah, it's quite out there. I'm allowed to have fun. This is my last pick of the video, the 8th expansion into our existing divisions. And so that means they're going into the AFC South, if you've been keeping track of that throughout the video. But yeah, while New Mexico is one of the lower populated states, it doesn't really have any buzz going for it or a successful program like I did with Boise, as I justified that. But it's the city that I landed on. When we get into honorable mentions, there's a lot of ones that get knocked off for various reasons, but Albuquerque does have the New Mexico Lobos Stadium temporarily that could be a home for it. And then, this is going to be the smallest market, so I think a new build isn't going to be the most forefront thing. I think, honestly, sharing for a while would be what ends up happening. It is the 32nd most populous city in the U.S., so it does have quite a good chunk of population out of New Mexico as a state. And so it's something that kind of fills in this gap on the west side. I think New Mexico just kind of feels like it should have a team. Obviously, there's a lot of that desert vibe that you could go for a mascot. And with Apaches, it's Apache Nation, and it gives more like of a Native American mascot to the NFL that isn't named the Redskins. So I think that they could definitely have a great matchups and great fan base building in New Mexico there. Getting into our honorable mentions, I do want to say that a lot of these cities, for the whole video, in fact, even the ones I did end up putting in the NFL expansion, did come from comments that were left on that first video that I mentioned at the start of this one. 1 year ago today, we did get a really good boost of views from a video, a lot of comments on that video, and all of them discussing NFL expansion. So a lot of thank you to all of you that commented. Now, with that, I did go through and comb through all of the suggestions for that, and so a lot of those end up on this honorable mentions list. Now, with San Diego, California, this was one I originally wanted to put into my actual expansion until I did the research for it, because the Chargers moved out and the city has demolished the stadium. So there's not really an easy plug and play stadium for the team to have. Next was St. Louis. Now, there's a lot of bad blood between St. Louis and the NFL, and they still have a poor stadium. The league moved the Rams out of St. Louis due to the poor stadium appearance, upkeep, the just a very poor stadium for an NFL level franchise, we'll say. And it hasn't really gotten renovated, and it hasn't gotten much use since. So with St. Louis, I think that just the history between the league and the city makes this one a no-go. Now with Oakland, the city did sell the rights to the stadium, and there is a construction group that is repurposing the site, and that was another place that I was like, oh yeah, Oakland, let's go ahead and put a team back there. Not so much the case with this one. Now with, you know, San Diego and Oakland, they're California teams, and I'm perfectly fine adding another one there after adding a team to Texas and to Florida. And then next we have Billings, Montana. This was one that popped up a lot in comments. However, it's 248th in terms of population of the US. Not exactly one I'm going to be pushing hard for. Birmingham, Alabama is another one. It's 126th in population. So again, a small group of people that would actually be the people that come in. And while I did mention, you know, college rivalries coming over, and Alabama is certainly one of those that could be in contention for that, I think the population and the fact that most of the population is going to be drunk on Saturday from their football team, I think would translate to lower attendance on Sunday. Now, next we have Louisville, Kentucky, which was actually a really solid one. They're 27th in population. It's just, I feel like a lot of these teams I did end up putting in have that stadium and have that population that they get that slight nod. And so I did end up not having Kentucky in it, although they were a great option. Then we have Iowa City, which does have a stadium, but it's kind of lacking on the other sides of things with population. And then I think what is one of the more impressive options to be on the honorable mentions list is Austin, Texas. Now, I didn't put it in because of its proximity to San Antonio, but with Jerry Jones as well, I don't think we're going to see two Texas teams get added in an expansion and dwindle away at his stock share of the market of Texas. I do think that Austin, Texas is a great option, and I even did some research into the mascots because I saw them as such a good option. To recap the video, I have added one team to every single division. I added the Boise Bobcats into the NFC North, the OKC Outlaws into the NFC East, the Portland Pioneers into the NFC West, and the San Antonio Vipers into the NFC South. And then on the AFC side, I added the White Wolves from Toronto into the AFC North, the Orlando Apollos into the AFC East, the Salt Lake City Stallions into the AFC West, and lastly, the New Mexico Apaches into the AFC South. Now, I would call them the New Mexico Apaches because no one wants to say Albuquerque or figure out how to say Albuquerque. But with that, that's all for this video. Thank you all for watching. Leave a comment down below on, you know, maybe one of these honorable mention teams I mentioned I missed something on, and you really think that there is more credence to the fact that they could become an NFL franchise, or if you really hate my pick of the Apaches or another city I did end up putting into the league, go ahead and let me know down below. And, you know, I think once a year revisiting this expansion conversation with the context from the comments. I think the comments really fueled this video and the script for this video, and even teams in consideration. So go ahead and leave your comments down below, and you might even find yourself in a future video. Thank you all for watching. Deuces.